Oh, GameStop. GameStop, GameStop, GameStop. They just can't win. They can't seem to get it right. Now, what they are doing, and this is according to apparently this flyer going around, this advert that's going to be in Game Informer, which, as we all know, is tied in to GameStop, and it's their monthly magazine. They advertise stuff in there. It's tied to the store. And what's interesting here is this advert that is floating around that's going to be in, I assume to be the next Game Informer, is something that I, myself, and Evan are actually very familiar with, because we were a part of a store that tried this exact same method back in 2009. And let me give you a little bit of a spoiler here. It didn't work. It actually hurt the store. And today I'm going to kind of go over a few things, and I'm going to show you how GameStop's proposed rental, their entire rental scheme that they're going to do, is not going to work, and it will actually hurt their store more than it will help them. And they're going to find out the hard way. I also want to mention that this shows that GameStop is absolutely desperate right now for anything that can help them. It really is, I think, coming up on the end of GameStop in general. I think we can kind of see the writing on the wall, right? Where we're getting to a point where physical media is dying slowly. We all see this. It's nothing new. Physical game sales have been going down more and more for a while now. Even things like Media Create and MPDs kind of talk about how, physical game sales are not what they were back, 6-7 years ago. The digital market is taking over. So here's the idea with GameStop. It's going to be kind of like, think of Gamefly, except you don't have it mailed to you. You go to GameStop and you pick something out on their used wall. It's all pre-owned stuff, and it's technically $10 a month. You have to apparently prepay for 6 months ahead of time, and then at the end you get to pick a game that you just keep outright. And that's something we didn't even do. That actually cuts in even further to what they're doing here, which is interesting. And according to the flyer that's floating around and everything, you also have to be a pro member, so tack an extra $15 for the entire year onto that. So if you do 2 years, it's $135. I know a lot of people are already pro members anyway, but that is their plan. Their plan is to incorporate a rental system into their store and also sell games, which is where the conflicting the nature of this whole thing starts to affect one another. So what happens is you have two different systems that are happening, and they both affect each other negatively. And that's exactly what we ran into on a smaller scale. So I also had the fortunate the unfortunate events of me actually working there. So I know a few things about what GameStop was doing. Now, granted, this was a while ago. This was back in 2007. I worked at GameStop. It was a while ago. I remember the Halo 3 launch was really big, and I remember Madden 08 was coming out. Call of Duty 4, yeah, I did that launch. There was a lot of stuff I did back then, and I remember I could actually see, because I was at like such a certain level, I could actually look at the amount of money that would come in every day at GameStop. And on average, this was, again, a while ago when physical media was like prevalent. You'd get physical media, and that was it still. Of course, there was some digital stuff happening, but for the most part, we were not to the point where you buy a game online and you preload it and you're ready to go. You went out to the store, you bought a game, you took it home, you popped it in, and you played it on your 360 or your PS3. The Wii was still really hard to find at the time because everyone wanted them, but still, people would come in and buy Wii games also. So here we were, and we were getting roughly anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 a day at GameStop. That was their take. Of course, there are also margins that you have to account for, how much the cost was. That was something we really couldn't see. We could just see gross sales. So they were really used to seeing like $140,000 to $150,000 a month coming into that store I worked at. I'm not going to say which store or anything, but that at that store, that is how much we would make per month minimum. There would be spikes when new games would come out. Like when Halo 3 came out, that night, I believe, it was a very busy night, obviously. It was $60 games, and we sold 800 of them, I think. I just remember that night was like 50 to 60 grand in one night. And that was like, in cash, it was like $30,000. It was pretty crazy. But here we are now with them, major decline, majorly in their sales. They've admitted it so much to like investors, and they're trying to figure out ways to get around this. They've bought ThinkGeek, for example. Now, here we are with this rental system. The plan here is to essentially monetize games that are not moving. And here's the issue that they run into, and it was something we ran into. When you get to a certain amount of rental customers, back at the store I worked at, and I'm going to tell you outright, this was a long time ago in like another life at this point. The store was called GamerDoc, and I worked there for a little while, and it worked well, and then a change of ownership, moved, all this stuff ended up happening, and it didn't work out essentially. But we cut the rental system out after, seriously, like maybe 10 months or so, maybe a year, because we started to find out that it started hurting our retail side because people would pick up games. Now, you'll see a flyer here. Again, this was from 2009, but don't worry about the bottom parts. We really stopped the premium games, which is when we let people rent brand new games, and we figured out right away, bad idea, right? But if you look at the top, there's 3 different categories. Basically, we would charge people more if they want to take out more than one game. But one game a month was $10, or one game at a time. You can change that as much as you wanted from the pre-owned wall. $10 per month. Exact same thing GameStop's doing, except they're making you prepay for 6 months. Something we figured out, though, as we started to approach like 200 customers. We started to realize a lot of our games were not on the wall because there would be, at any given time, 200 to 300 games missing from the wall. And that was a lot. I mean, that's a lot of games to take out of the retail store, and it just wasn't there. It was floating. And the other thing we figured out was when a game was first traded in, it's $50, right? But it would depreciate very quickly. If you don't know, games right now, especially more than ever, they depreciate so fast. So when a game gets traded in, GameStop wants to flip it as soon as possible. But if a game gets traded in, somebody rents it, it's going to depreciate by the time they bring it back and it's done getting passed around. So that game that they would try to sell for like $50 is now selling at a used price of like $25 or $30. GameStop is really bad about that. They depreciate those used games rapidly because they need to move them. So their plan now is to turn around and get people to rent these games. And it sounds great on paper, right? It's like, oh, you're going to get this much money guaranteed per month. But for the amount of money GameStop needs with their overhead, they need several times more than 200 people per store signing up for this. Because keep in mind, that's $2,000 a month for them. When I can tell you now, a rent at the place I was, because I know what it was, since we were across the street at the store that was a smaller store, and I know what the rent was there, was over $3,000 per month. At some of these locations in a mall, it's significantly more than that. Sometimes even double or triple that at the mall. There's a mall near me that has a GameStop, and I know the rent is high, because I know the rent there is high. I checked at one point, just for fun, for when they were thinking about moving the stores. I was like, let me look around and see if there's any places around here, because the owners weren't familiar too much. We checked the mall. The mall was like $9,000 a month for a standard size store. So here's GameStop, $3,000 something a month. So right away, they're looking maybe to cover their rent. That's what we did. So now they're looking for, say, 300 customers, which means 300 games are going to go missing off the wall. And at the end of the 6 months, those 300 games are not coming back because they're going to look to sell them. Now, the good news about this is it is heavily profit, but keep in mind, the trade will go down because you'll have less games on the wall for people to buy. Your retail side will go down because there will just be less games to trade in for and then buy. So that entire retail side is hurt by this rental side, and they're going to try something in the store. It's not going to work. The two sides are going to clash. Their sales will fall. Their sales are going to fall. Their most profitable stuff is being passed around until it really depreciates in value. And people are going to have less reason to trade in for other used games. Sure, new games come out, they'll trade them in. But this is a very desperate move on GameStop's part. And this tells me right now, GameStop is in more trouble than people realize. They are in blockbuster trouble right now. Like, they're not to that sales point, but their future is looking as grim as Blockbusters was when Netflix showed up. Okay, where the writing was on the wall. GameStop is at that point when digital sales are on the rise and physical media is on the decline in terms of sales. And we don't even know at this point if the next generation, if they're even going to have physical media. We like to assume there will be disk drives in them, but I mean, how are they going to put hundreds of gigabytes of 4K files on Blu-rays? Are we going to go with those more expensive, Blu-ray X or whatever it's called? I don't think anyone wants to do that anymore. For how much money it costs to move these games out. I like physical media. I also understand the logistics of it and how much it costs. I don't think any of these companies want to give places like GameStop or the wholesalers, I don't think they want to give them money anymore. They don't, because they have to give GameStop $10 per copy. They have to give the wholesalers $5, the shipping, maybe they get $42 back per $60 game sold. That's all money they could really be getting back if they open their own storefront or like online store, like how there's Origin and all this stuff. They won't do that, but it seems like wasted money on their side. Printing the discs, all this stuff, or even further back end. So GameStop's in trouble. This is pretty clear a desperate move on their part to keep money, to keep people coming into the stores. And this isn't going to last. This is going to be something that they try. They're going to realize what I'm telling you right now, which is that their retail side and the rental side will start clashing heavily because games that are $50 normally will not be there. People will rent those first. And then people won't buy them. And by the time they come back, that $50 game will have depreciated down to 30, 20, 15, with how these things pretty much fall in price. So I don't think it's going to work out. Let me know what you guys think, though, because I've been around the block with this stuff in retail, like I've told you. I lived through those days way back in the day with GameStop. I lived through days with mom and pop stores all over the place. And this is exactly what I saw happen back in 2009, and then we got rid of it in like 2010s because it did not work. Let me know what you guys think, though. I'm very curious, and I'll see you next time.